Today's reading is from 1 Corinthians 12 in your Pew Bible. That's page number 813. Starting at verse 12, and I know the bulletin says I'm stopping at verse 20, but I'm going to go to 26. The body is a unit, though it is made up of many parts, and though all its parts are many, they form one body. So it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, slave or free, and we were all given the one Spirit to drink. Now the body is not made up of one part, but of many. If the foot should say, "Because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body," it would not for that reason cease to be part of the body. And if the ear should say, "Because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body," it would not for that reason cease to be part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has arranged the parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, "I don't need you," and the head cannot say to the feet, "I don't need you." On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable, and the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty, while our presentable parts need no special treatment. But God has combined the members of the body and has given greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. This is the word of the Lord. Favoritism stinks. It stinks. And if you've ever experienced favoritism of some kind, you know it stinks. But we are all sort of primed to jockey for position, aren't we? And we know this if we have ever come across young people in any way. When I did youth ministry with middle schoolers, oh my goodness, every time I saw these kids, I would get the question, "Am I your favorite? Am I your favorite? I know I'm your favorite, aren't I?" And in excellent practice for motherhood, of course, my response was, "You're all my favorite in your own special way." I grew up in a family where we were a blended family. And so my parents worked really hard to help us all feel like we were equally part of the family. Maybe even went overboard. Sometimes I have to tell my mom, like, it's okay if you spent $5 extra on my sister at Christmas. Like, I've moved beyond, that kind of jealousy. But I realized the reason I've been able to move on from that kind of jealousy is because I know how hard my parents work to make sure we all kind of feel equally supported. I actually don't get jealous if I see my parents do something with another one of my siblings. I know this is like a loaded subject, right? Family favoritism, because every family navigates that space differently. And for parents, you never feel like you got it right. Never feel like you got it right. So there is no way of saying there's like a perfect way to do this, but the striving is really important because we all know that it stinks to feel like Someone else got special treatment because they were liked more. Someone else got extra stuff at Christmas or got a special celebration on their birthday, or maybe at work, they get paid more than you for doing the same job, or maybe they get extra projects even though they're not as good at the job as you are because the boss just likes them more. Did they have brains? Or, wait, what's the line from Popular? No, they were just popular. It stinks to feel like you got treated differently because they just didn't like you as much. It's a really rotten feeling. And I bet that all of us have been in an environment, whether, like I said, maybe it was your family growing up, maybe it was your workplace, maybe it was a friend group, where you feel like you got treated differently for some kind of arbitrary social reason, or maybe not an arbitrary social reason. Just as a reminder, we talked about the first section of this chapter last week. We talked about this context in 1 Corinthians, in the church in Corinth, where people were treating each other differently. People were arguing about their social status based on the world markers of what social status should be, based on somebody's wealth or their race or whether they were even enslaved or free, their religious background, maybe where they grew up, maybe the job that their dad had, maybe the neighborhood that they grew up in. And Paul is writing to this church and he's trying to help them ease this conflict that has bubbled up within them. I mean, these people cannot get along. I don't know if you've ever been in an environment, maybe a church or a family holiday or a team where people just could not get along for more than 5 minutes because they just started arguing about stuff. Back in this day, you couldn't just head to second congregational church or third congregational church, right? Like the church that was in your community was the church that was in your community, and you've got to figure it out. Because it's not just about how the people in that community feel, it's about the witness that your church is bearing about who Jesus is and the work that he has done among us. There's something very powerful that happens to a church that opens itself up to the movement of the Spirit to say, we are all one. We're all committed to that. That's not something that happens easily in our society. That's not something that happens easily in the human heart. We are kind of primed, for whatever reason, to eke out our spot in society for survival, for whatever conclusion we feel like we are needing to pursue. So there's all this competition, people are arguing, it's getting in the way of the work of the church. And not just that, but as a reminder, as we walk through this season of Epiphany, that God is glory. God reveals his glory in Jesus Christ. Jesus sends the Spirit, which allows the church to proclaim and demonstrate the glory of Jesus on this planet. No pressure. No pressure, everybody. I can't do that in my own strength. I might be able to pretend really well for a while, it actually takes a work of the power of the Spirit in my heart and my mind and my brain to shape me to be the kind of person who doesn't have to ask, well, hey, what do I get out of this? Well, hey, what about me? Where do I fit into all of this? What am I getting out of this deal? That's what human flesh causes us to ask from community. And isn't that so often the thing that gets in the way of our ability to pursue unity with one another? When we see someone else getting treated better than us and we go, well, hey, what about me? Didn't anybody think about me? I think it's the worst question a Christian could possibly ask. If you're thinking about being a disciple of Jesus, becoming a Christian of maturity, I'm not pointing any fingers except this way, which is to say, for me, that has become a question of how I help myself determine my Christian maturity, my discipleship journey. How often am I thinking about what I'm getting out of the deal from a community? How often am I asking out of my relationship, well, wait, what about me? How often am I looking at how do I say this? I feel that a lot of the political conversation has been quite stifled and stymied by the question, well, what about me? Instead of, like, what's the antidote to that? The antidote to feeling like you're being left out and left behind is always generosity. It's always stepping back into the space and giving more. Because, right, when we like compare ourselves to other people, which way are we tempted to look the most? Those who have more than us. This conversation happens at my house all the time. We're in like the top 10% wealthiest people on the entire planet. You want to look at friends have this, people who don't have kids, or people whose parents help them with something, people who are in a completely different life stage than us. You want to compare yourself to people who have more? You're not going to get anywhere with that. Look at the 90% of this planet's population who have less, and then see how you're stacking up. Because Paul writes in this passage that within the church, our goal is to be unity in the Spirit. And that comes from the message of Jesus, who laid down his status at the right hand of God the Father, became a human, born into a village where nothing good comes from there, and took on the lowest social standing. If you feel like you've gotten left behind in life, if you feel like you've gotten left behind in society, let's compare ourselves with the lowest people in our society. Now, I don't know who comes into your mind when I say that. But when Paul is writing to the church in Corinthians, I'm sure that they had people within their society, and he says that God has inverted this social standing so that it's not about the people who have the greatest merit or the greatest wealth or the greatest education. It's inverted. It's the people who have the least that should be given the most honor. The less you have that would put you in a position of honor in the world, the more honor you should receive at church. The more honor you should receive within the community. And that is kind of the calculus that Paul has given to the church to be able to determine, how do we actually solve this whole ranking problem? We turn it upside down. And so the person who has now been striving to say, well, I should probably be like president of this church, or I should probably be given the best seat at the table and the most access to, I should probably be first in line at all the church potlucks. Because, well, you know who my dad is. I had a pastor friend, who was from the Asian American church community, and she always, because the Asian American community and Asian culture is much more of an honor culture, which is something that we could compare to the church in Corinth, right? These people are pursuing honor within their communities. And so she would teach us a lot about what it means to pursue honor. And that honor is not something you can take, it's something that's given. And so for people, like when I grew up in a pastor's family, we were white, and we were part of a mostly white church. And so how do we give honor? You're first in line. You're brought up to stand on the platform. You are bestowed public honor in certain ways. This friend said, if we have a church potluck, the pastor always goes last. Because more is less. It's actually the people who have the least social honor that should go first. I think that this is true in so many different areas in our church communities. Something that I've been really passionate about in church ministry is making sure that we have inclusion, especially for families who have kids with disabilities. That people who, if you were to look at like the entire United States of who is the largest unreached group in the United States with the gospel, it's parents who have kids with a disability. Because so many parents will come to church, maybe their kid is disruptive, they get asked to leave. You say, oof, I'm not really sure our church can accommodate this need. I get very worked up about that because it's not what this says. This says, your child has a disability. If you have a disability, you are bestowed the greatest honor. You are now the most important person in our church. We'll bend over backwards to make sure that your family has a home here. I think that that's something for us to consider as we head into this next year of, Paul very specifically mentions race, ethnic background. We are a majority white church. We are. It is very important that we as a majority white church, in the context of Billerica, make space for people and stories and backgrounds that may not be the same as mine. It's been very interesting, when I came on staff here, I joined all the Billerica boards, and There's been a lot of conversation on the Billerica Facebook boards about people of color in Billerica who are feeling like they don't have a home. They're not at home in Billerica. And um, the gospel of Christ says that everybody, no matter what your background is, we have to give greater honor to the parts that feel like they're not given the honor, that feel like they're not included. I think that that's something really important for our church to pay attention to in a community that's feeling that way, in a community that has changed so much. I was talking to the principal of the high school in Billerica, and he was saying that Billerica itself has gone from 93% white to like 63% white. That's a huge social change in this community. And he said, like, it's obviously that changes the conversations that are happening in a community. It changes the way that people are relating to one another. Is there room to have these conversations in this place? Is there room for us to say, like, okay, well, of course we would say, yes, we would never want to say that a child with a disability is not included here. But how do we structure our times? How do we structure our programs? How do we structure the way that we welcome people in so that we are communicating honor in the parking lot? Okay, we don't have a parking lot, but at the at the driveway. What are we communicating to this neighborhood to say? You have a seat of honor in our church. We're ready for you. I think we can go from beyond nodding our heads, on Sunday, to implementing changes. That's not a criticism at all. It's just saying the agreement feels like it's there, but they're not here. So how can we make structural changes to make sure that we're communicating welcome and honor to the people who, in our society, get the least honor? How are we communicating from a majority white church to our community that we want to be a place where people who feel like they haven't found their people in Billerica yet know that there's a seat safe for them? How do we communicate that welcome starting in the driveway? Because as people integrate within and participate in this body, this metaphor of the body is used to help the church understand that we're interconnected. That in our church, if we're a majority white church, like, a lot of us are eyeballs because we have that similarity in common. We need diversity. We need more people who are from different backgrounds to help fulfill our call to be a body made up of many different kinds of parts. And we can't say, oh, well, if you're this or that, you are not fully a part of it. We have to really go out of our way to communicate that honor and to communicate that posture. God has combined the members of the body, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there is no division in the body, that all of its parts should have equal concern for each other. There's a cohesion that happens through the work of the Spirit in this body as we all bring different things, right? We all bring different attitudes. And I thought it was really funny because a couple of weeks ago, I told y'all that story about how I'm terrible at math. And I know, I'm like, it makes me look so dumb, and I know that, that I like really couldn't handle ninth grade math. But some of you are nodding with me, right? You're like, yeah, I failed algebra 1 too. It's okay. Some of you are better at math. And you're like, I don't get it. What's so hard? But then I change the subject, right? And it's like, well, once we get into the realm of having interpersonal conversations, facilitating discussions, having hard conversations, talking about the emotional realm and that interpersonal side. And I saw some of you go, that's not for me. Right? Thank God. If I went through a list of all kinds of different things, I don't want to be messing with this electricity. Y'all do not want me to be messing with this electricity. People will die. And it would probably be me. Right? We have people who bring different strengths and weaknesses because we round each other out. If everybody brought the same talent, if everybody brought the same skill set, if everybody brought the same interests, right? Everybody brings their different passions and their perspectives. We're going to connect with different people. We're going to move forward in different ways. And there is a cohesion that happens when we say, I don't really get your deal, but I honor you. I thank you for bringing that with you. It's a different way of looking at it than I can. I need you. We need each other. We need each other because each one of us, as we live out the gifting that the Spirit gives each one of us, we reflect God's goodness, God's glory to the world. And we show the world a little slice of heaven, a little slice of people who really couldn't be more different from each other in a lot of ways, right? Loving and honoring and supporting one another, using their differences not as ways to become polarized, but using our differences to create an energy that moves us forward instead of getting trapped in the mire of disagreements. So Paul really gives us a roadmap here. It's not just about the gifts that you have and using those. I think that that's a really important discussion for us to continue having as we continue a discipleship journey. For you to discover what your gifting is and why God has called you into this community, how you will bless this community through God's gift. But really the more important thing, and I think especially in the social context that we are being the church within, it's a call to unity. It's a call to not just nodding our heads and saying, yes, I agree, but creating those places for people who are different to really become fully members of who we are and to challenge us so that God can shape us more deeply to be like him, to be like his son. We're going to close with the hymn 477. It only takes a spark.